You probably noticed that there are certain blockchains that develop so fast and they come out with innovative solutions, but then they break, they go down and then you have to reset it and, you have to change the code. And by doing that, you're also changing the rules of the game.
When you think about identity and then you think about blockchain, are those two separate layers? How they are interacting between each other to make sure their identity is proven, is verified, and that way we can kind of have more transparency and security as well.
Because some of the tasks people has been doing in the past is just not value adding when you have a superior technology as blockchain or AI. But they will have a role if they choose to play that role, because it actually takes up, years and years of solid work to become a trusted institution.
Joining me today is Frederik Gregaard, CEO of Cardano Foundation. Governance is super important and is something that has been overlooked in the blockchain and crypto space. Cardano has put governance at the top of its priority. What we need to have a good governance in crypto, why AI and blockchain should interact to build better data models. Identity is the base for mass adoption of crypto and also heading towards interoperability and standard of regulation. When we talk about interoperability, people think just about interoperability of blockchains, but it's not just that. It's actually being interoperable with the legacy systems. Before we get into the interview, I want to ask you a favor. If you're not yet part of our community, please join us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to our podcast on Spotify. Leave us a review. More support that we can get from our community, better the show can be. And I really want to have more of you following us, interacting and engage with our channel. Ask any question that you have. Leave a comment on YouTube and also follow us on social media to stay up to date with our news and interviews, but also interact with us. Remember, you can always DM me or send me an email at steffi@financialfox.news. And just one thing, all the content here is for informational purposes only. We don't give any financial advice. Remember, when it comes down to crypto, the market is very volatile and you need to make sure that you do all your due diligence, all your research before you make any investment decision. Hi, Frederik. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Steffi, for inviting me.
Yeah, it's really good. So today, obviously, we are going to be talking about Cardano. You are the CEO of Cardano Foundation. So tell me a little bit about what Cardano Foundation does and, how you are helping the Cardano ecosystem to strive.
Yeah, sure. So the Cardano Foundation is quite different setup than a traditional blockchain foundation, if I can use the term so wide. So we don't own the Cardano blockchain. We don't direct the Cardano blockchain. We don't own the monetary policy. We haven't done an ICO or anything like that. So we are sort of differently positioned, which also means that we can do different things. So last year, the three things we were focusing a lot on was operation resilience, because we have this notion that Cardano is built for billions of people. And alone that is something we can have maybe an hour discussion about, because we think about blockchains, they're not normally built for scale. But Cardano actually is. And if you want to have 1 billion people and you want to have sort of business critical or life critical applications, you want to ensure that the blockchain continues and it doesn't go down. So this notion about disaster recovery and about predictability and reliability of the blockchain is very important. You probably noticed that there are certain blockchains that develop so fast and they come out with innovative solutions, but then they break, they go down and then you have to reset it and, you have to change the code. And by doing that, you're also changing the rules of the game, which basically puts sort of a question on, why do we have a blockchain compared to a centralized sort of, normal technology stack? So operational resilience is the first silo or thorn in the Cardano Foundation, which is very important for us. The second thing is education. So what we noticed in the last, for me, I've been in blockchain and cryptocurrencies for about 6-7 years now, or something like that. Actually a bit more than that now. But we noticed is that for many of us, we came into this space because of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is an amazing invention. It really changed the game. But it's also so strong and so focused on one specific use case that very often it's very hard for you to go away from that use case and look at something completely different. So when we speak about education, we really think about two things. We think about regulators, policymakers, auditors, and lawyers. What do they need to know about third generation blockchains, where there is not one use case, but there's thousands of use cases, where there's not one type of identity, but there's different types of identity. And when there's not just, let's say, not one type of governance, but there's multiple types of governance. What does that really do? And one of the first things we see it does is it changes the notion that blockchain is only for capital markets use cases. It can be for a lot of different things. The other part of education is really related to the fact that blockchain had a hype maybe 1 or 2 years ago, and a lot of people were speaking about it, and it was sort of the Swiss Army knife solution to everything. If something didn't go well, you say, you can use a blockchain and it would be much better. So what we tried to do is we launched an educational platform, which is called the Cardano Certificate, which basically is a way for you to get free, high quality, up to date third generation blockchain knowledge, which takes you from no knowledge to enough knowledge that you can deploy something on the blockchain. So it's not for software coders, because then you need to code, right? But it's enough that a business person will be able to understand what can I actually do. So what use cases are good and what use cases would not fit so well to a blockchain. And last but not least, we work within what we think about as adoption. And with adoption is really this notion that Cardano, any blockchain, not just Cardano, need to get to what we think about as escape velocity. Escape velocity is defined as when you get to the state where there is sufficient business or commercial value, we can think about like that, who goes into the blockchain, that the blockchain becomes self-sufficient in terms of incentives, resources, and community. And to do that, what's important is transaction diversity. You want to get to a situation that you have multiple different types of applications and users and so on who uses the blockchain for something relevant. And when they use something on a blockchain, which is one of the foundational forces of a blockchain, it costs a little bit, right? But that little thing, if it's a gas fee or transaction fee, is what powers the economic circle that the stake pool operators have enough incentive to get up, in the late mornings because there's a problem with block propagation, or they see no warning, or whatever that is. And I think these things sort of creates this loop, this never-ending circle, which basically makes the blockchains immortal if they're correctly done. So we've been focusing a lot on that for the last year. And we got really, really far. And we'd love to talk about some of those things, or we can talk about what's going on in the next 12 months.
Wow. Well, you mentioned so many things here. And I think one aspect that I would like to stress before we get maybe a little bit more deeper into the Cardano community and ecosystem is about the role of governance. So governance has been a big problem, a challenge, a failure in the crypto space. We have seen, many bad events happening over the last couple of years, during this crypto winter, but I would say since the beginning of crypto, especially because there was no governance, right? So how important is governance, and how do you build a high standard governance in crypto?
So this is very difficult, right? And we are going back all the way to the ancient Greeks who defined, governance and, democracy and different types of hierarchical structures and so on. The reason why the old Greeks and the textbooks from back then is still prevalent in how we rule society today at large on the spaceship we call Earth is because, that's simply the best we got. It's humans dealing with humans. And I think what really changed now is two things. First and foremost is for the first time we have a technology which is so dramatically different and has the ability to anchor everybody on the spaceship or Earth in, and that's called blockchain. And the second thing which is happening really at scale right now, is artificial intelligence. Whether this is machine learning or neural networks and so on, we can get into that later if you want, right? But that combination of those two things is really challenging how things are going on. And I think what's happening right now is that on what I think about as the social systems in blockchain is that you rightfully says there's been a lot of learnings around governance, and we've seen maybe some other platforms not faring so well. We even saw the largest platform saying, hey, we don't want governance on chain because they said, it's just too complicated. It will never work. We need to deal with that off chain. And what we believe in Cardano is we believe that if you build a social system, really like an infrastructure, a public infrastructure is going to be the foundational force of society when we move along into the next stage where we'll be coexisting with robots and AI and so on. You need to do that right, and you need to get as much on chain as possible. Otherwise, you will not be able to safeguard against some of those sort of ill consequences of technology. And so the first thing we did in the Cardano Foundation is we said we have a blockchain, we have cryptographic primitives. We actually do have everything we need to do a good vote. So we actually did a voting event this year where we basically said, there is some systems or there's some optimizations of a blockchain. It's called protocol parameters, who allows the blockchain to skew it in a certain direction. And we picked up two things which we think will not break Cardano, but it will change Cardano. So one thing is what's called the min pool fee, which is basically sort of the minimum cost from a stake pool operator. And the other one is what is the optimal amount of, from an economic perspective, of stake pool operators in the system. So there's two a little bit nerdy things. Sorry for that for listeners, but just think about this as two governance events who will not break the system. And then we basically created from the Cardano Foundation a way where all the stake pool operators could do a vote with an identity which was public. Normally when you vote, it's secret, right? So that you won't tell people what you're voting because then you get exposed. And we wanted to do the opposite with us for this example, because when you expose people, they become representatives. They nearly become politicians, right? Because then suddenly, a politician cannot say, oh, I don't want to say how I voted, because he's represented a constituency behind him. So by creating this way of a very good digital identity, solid in the crypto primitives, and having the 3,000 something stake pool operators, giving them the ability to vote, we actually created a situation where everyone could see how their stake pool operator was voting. And then there was a 2-week gap where the people who has been delegating to that stake pool operator could say, I don't agree with what you voted. I will now found a new stake pool. So that gave us the learning wheels and the data points for the future development of governments to kind of understand what does it mean when you do a public vote versus a secret vote. And actually today is a very special day because I just voted on behalf of the Cardano Foundation in what we think about as the pre-ratification of the Cardano Improvement Proposal CIP 1694, which gives us the governance tooling to do even more advanced voting, but also to put an on-chain governance in place on Cardano. And, in that, by doing that, we will then now not just, do that for the first time because we had this previous experience. Plus we have what we think about as catalyst, where we already have a lot of funds who's being distributed also through a voting mechanism. So I think one of the things when you ask me, what are you doing differently since it seems to be working with you on Cardano, is that we're trying to do small things to get learnings and data points, to do incremental learnings instead of just one big switch and now it's day, we try to say, okay, how do we get these data points and how can we kind of not just we learn as a community, but also the people who will enter Cardano and the Cardano community in the future, how can they look back at some of those events and get some learnings and also participate in the future voting proposals and also on how you count the vote, for instance, and those kind of things.
I think it's very interesting that you mentioned about creating the social infrastructure system as a fundamental to develop governance instance on-chain, and the focus on identity being really the game changer. I was at a conference last week in London where we were discussing about how we can make regulation interoperable across different jurisdictions. And one of the solutions that we came up in the panel was really having this digital identity, so your identity portable across different jurisdictions as perhaps a base, to build a regulatory framework that is interoperable. And I know that Cardano has been focusing on identity for many, many years. Probably was the first blockchain that really focused on identity. With I remember working with the guys at Atala Prism, and there was always a big effort. Even in emerging market, we put identity first because that's what enabled financial inclusion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think and what I think people get wrong is very often you think about identity as you do when you open a bank account. So it's something to do with an official issued document from the state. It's something to do with maybe 3 salary slips and something like that. We think about identity much wider. So for instance, at the moment, I just got this, by the way, we were the first to see this. This is a wine from Georgia. It's from Bolnisi. It's a region there. And what's special about this particular wine is not that it has a QR code which by the way is an identity of this wine. This exact wine is on the blockchain. But what you will see when you go on the blockchain and look at this wine, you will see that the Georgian government is also issuing an identity from the agriculture ministry with a certificate of conformity saying that this has gone through the export controls of the Georgian government to be exported as wine. And now suddenly we're speaking about, oh, hold on a second, there's multiple identities here, right? There's an identity from a government who is verifying a set of data, sort of like a digital identifier thing. There's the identity of the wine. There's the identity of the custom authorities. And when you think about that in sort of in a larger context, this is much wider than what we classically think as what you need to do a financial transaction, right? So you have lighter identities for machine identities. You will have something which enables that oracles are not just an oracle, but it's also, maybe holding a part of a data record to verify that it is correctly issued, right? And you have sort of maybe official, trade documents, maybe under one of the World Trade Organization standards for trade documents and so on. And I think this is so important. This is the power of digital transformation across nation states, across systems. And I think that's going to unleash so much value for the whole world as large.
When you think about identity and then you think about blockchain, how do you see the two? Are those two separate layers? How they are interacting between each other to make sure their identity is proven, is verified, and that way we can kind of have more transparency and security as well?
Well, I always think about that there is an on-chain component, there's an off-chain component. As soon as it moves off-chain, I think it becomes very often a little bit of a political aspect, and it becomes, it's in the mercy of our traditional systems. And that's not necessarily bad. It's just a trade-off we need to be aware of. But I think that, a couple of years ago, we spoke a lot about that blockchain will disintermediate everything. There will be no banks, there will be no brokers, there will be no lawyers, and so on. And I think what we kind of realize as an industry today is that's not the case. What it will do is it will change the nature of these so-called trust anchors, because some of the tasks people has been doing in the past is just not value adding when you have a superior technology as blockchain or AI. But they will have a role if they choose to play that role, because it actually takes up years and years of solid work to become a trusted institution, or to become a trusted person or a trusted representative in a certain way. So I think what's going to happen is that some of these off-chain capabilities is anchored into how we are as humans. Not everybody will need to understand how the blockchain works, but they will probably benefit from that. And that means that you will get a situation where interoperability among blockchains, but even more importantly, between blockchains and off-chain systems, and between a combination of the on-chain, off-chain, and the traditional systems. And only by doing that, we will be able to cope with the need we have right now to protect our citizens and protect, our way of life actually from turning in a very, very bad direction.
Yeah, 100%. Listen, you mentioned AI a couple of times, and I want to get to this point because I think we are still in a time where people look at AI and then people look at blockchain, but they are considering two silos technology where actually they aren't, because you can have, a good, responsible, transparent AI models if you have blockchain that is backing the data and is powering, good data to train certain models. But I would like you to add maybe some color, your perspective about how AI is actually helping or is interacting with blockchain to move forward for a better society, better solution, better application.
Yeah, so I don't know if your listeners know, right, but we have some very large AI projects who's been on Cardano for quite a long time. And I have sort of a little bit of a different view on AI than many other people, because I was one of the first to introduce robo-advisory in capital markets and investment banking in Switzerland, and been working with the regulators around, how do you actually dissect these decision trees to protect the consumers. But I've also been in Brussels working with them on certain things regarding data security and so on. So the way I kind of think about it is that AI is coming, and it's coming very fast, and you can't stop it. And I think, regulating it is the wrong move, because you won't be able to regulate the whole world. You would need to kind of agree the whole world that on a certain set of parameters. And that won't happen. And when first this, thing is out of the box, is out of the box. So what you really need to do is you have to think about adjacent technologies and what is the value add, and what will that do in terms of securing the continuous development of AI, but also that we capture the value out of it without taking too much risk. And here I have a couple of points, which I normally sort of mention, which might be new, but let me go through it a little bit, and then you can challenge me on it. So the first one is when you merge AI or machine learning models or neural networks with blockchain. The first point is data integrity and traceability. Because blockchain provides a secure and immutable record of data transactions, you basically get a different quality of the data integrity when you use blockchain data for the large language models and AI in the training. So it's basically about consistency and unaltered and traceability back to its source. The second thing, so you get more computable data is what I'm trying to say more. On a lower level. The next thing is the decentralization of AI models. So when you build AI models and you build that in a decentralized approach, you have the ability to democratize AI by allowing multiple parties to contribute to and benefit from shared AI models without a central authority. This is, of course, not something sort of large businesses want at large, right? Because it's their, it's their work, it's their property, right? They want to earn money on it, right? But I think, in this way, you will really harness the power of open source software technology, but you will also have the ability to have a more equitable usage of AI. So I think in this case, decentralization really means democratization of it. Then when we think about privacy and security, I do think that, as we spoke about before, that blockchain can enhance privacy and security in AI systems with techniques like zero knowledge proofs. Blockchains can help in securing data sensitivity. We have the identity play we spoke about before. Then transparency and fair AI, which you alluded to, due to the fact that on a public permissionless blockchain, all these things are live. The data is viewable. It might not be readable if you have a privacy layer on it, but you see the data structure. And that allows you to really think about audit and understanding of how certain conclusions were reached, which means that you have a new way of doing auditability. What many people don't realize is that when you look at these AI models in neural networks, we actually don't understand how they take that decision. We see, this is the parameters and we see a decision outcome, but we don't see any logical conclusion in between. And then, of course, smart contracts and automated transactions in a relationship to AI basically means that you will have an enhanced collaboration ability between the technology stacks. So I think there's a lot which attributes towards this decentralization, transparency, and security of AI models by using blockchain. And I think it cannot be underestimated how important that will be in the future.
Yeah, 100%. I think we are still at a very early stage here because understanding all these components that you just mentioned, I was quite interested in the decentralized aspect of AI using blockchain. So enabling different people to contribute to the data, how you're going to make sure the integrity of the data if you are decentralizing that. The quality, let's say, integrity.
Yeah. So let's think about that for a moment, right? So most people are sort of starting to become familiar with large language models as OpenAI and BART and some of those, right? And I think it's so easy to use, right? But what people don't understand is that they don't verify whether things are correct or not correct. What they do is they look at a very large amount of data. Most of the time, this is the internet. And on the internet, it doesn't cost you anything to put up data. I mean, the cost of publishing something is zero, but the cost of taking something down is very expensive. And that means that there's a skew towards incorrect and wrong information. And, if you think about it on Google, right, the first search results you get on page number 1 is amazing. But if you go down on page 8, 9, or 10, you will get a lot of scams and giveaways and, you get all this wrong thing, but you never go there as a human, right? You stay on page 1 because it's so good, right? Now, the way the large language models work is they look at all of the data and it doesn't look at whether it's correct or not correct. It just look at the data representative. And if you then fast forward to a data model on a blockchain, it is so that every time you want to put some data on a blockchain, it costs you something. Now on Ethereum, this can be quite a lot. On Cardano, it's not a lot. And you can even find even cheaper blockchains, right? So but the fact that it costs just a tiny little thing means that there's an economic cost of publishing the data. So already by that, as an economist, as I am, looking at game theory, you would know that the data, all things being equal, would always be better on a blockchain because there's an associated cost to it compared to a system where the cost of distributing and publishing data is free. So already there you can think about integrity must be better.
So fascinating. Listen, if we have to talk about project, they are developing this AI next technology intersected with blockchain. You mentioned that Cardano has been doing some work in the space already. Do you have any specific project or any specific area where you have seen some interesting development? I don't want you to mention project if you don't want to. It's more about where you are seeing maybe founders or developers focusing on, and you think that's actually a very interesting aspect.
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, the decentralized data on blockchains has allowed some really, really cool models in terms of AI representation, and using the Cardano blockchain as a data lake is really moving nicely ahead. And if you want, you can go in on what's called Cardano Cube, and you can get sort of an overview on some of these projects in whatever area you want, and also the more specifically AI and that kind of thing. The other part is this idea about computable data, and there we already done some integrations to some very large data providers who only does computable things. So if you want to understand how many oil tankers who crossed the Caribbean Ocean in December month, and with what kind of average cargo they were, hauling and so on, you can actually do that and combine that with Cardano and a large language model today. So these kind of places where you have this ability to basically not just look at the blockchain as being sort of a decentralized storage database, but you have the ability that say, okay, what I need to do is I need to have computable data. I want to run a model on top of some computable data, and I want to have the ability to anchor some hashes or have a trust layer in between where there is some transaction or there is some output in smart contracts can happen. Then what you've suddenly done is you change the complete operating model for reinsurance, for instance, right? Or you completely change the way we look at tracking supply chain data among, the European Union versus China, right? And I think this is where I'm really, really excited to see how blockchain in the future will not stand alone like a technology which is for digital natives and Web3. What blockchain is going to really do is it's going to go together with some Internet of Things or sensor technology, together with some of this compute data, right? And then you're going to be able to run these models on top of that. And then when you run those models, whether you're going to publicly show them or whether you're just going to leave a footprint of them, it doesn't really matter so much, because you always leave a footprint when you interact with the blockchain, which means you leave a little bit more on the table than what you took. And that little bit more on the table would allow you to do even more accurate models or use that data in another way, which we haven't even thought about today. And you then by that create innovation, which is anchored into some of these exponential technologies, but using blockchain as a foundation. And then you have this hockey stick moment of this where business models completely change. And we might have a chance that society actually can come together and work together instead of always sort of, beseeching each other and warring against each other. A new trust layer for bridging technologies together is essentially what I'm talking about.
Well, there is so much work, I think, that Cardano Foundation has been doing on the infrastructure, the technology infrastructure, the governance, everything that we discuss right now to lay the fundamentals to build a new societal system. It's very interesting, and I think that's probably one of the major differentiator of Cardano from other blockchain that we said, they break, you need to fix them, and they just try to focus maybe on, increasing transaction, increasing revenue or value created by, the usage, these TVL kind of metrics and stuff like that. Now, I know that Cardano had a big event earlier on last month. You also talk about computable data there, but do you maybe want to give me like a few highlights, how the event go, what are the major takeaways from the event, and maybe after we can talk a little bit about the strategy that Cardano Foundation has for 2024.
Sure. Yeah, so we had what we call the Cardano Summit. Last year it was in Lausanne in Switzerland, and this year we chose Dubai. One of the reasons for choosing Dubai for the main event, as we call it, was because Dubai has in the last sort of years, they've been doing a lot in terms of technology and bringing transparency into the regulatory framework for technologies. Secondly, Dubai is I don't know if you can think about it traditionally, but the geographical location of Dubai actually anchors in 3 continents, both Asia, Africa, and Europe. So it's a geographically really well positioned. And besides the event in Dubai, we had over 20 community-led events with thousands of people coming together physically and discussing innovation, Cardano, industry, what can you do on a blockchain, but also celebrating how far we come on the development circle. And what we really wanted to do in Dubai was we wanted to create a space where not only was it about, third generation blockchains and Cardano, it was also about how we bridge the world into the off-chain world, really into the classical world, whether that's, coffee producing or, voting systems and so on. And I think we really did that extremely well. So the event opened up with Dr. Marwan, which is one of the persons who's been incremental in building up a blockchain-enabled Dubai. It's really amazing what they all put on a blockchain there. If you haven't noticed that should be maybe a future podcast for you to do. Is really mind-blowing how much they have on a blockchain in Dubai. And from that, we basically worked ourselves into both the technical aspects, so, satisfying developers, but we also worked into, the more policy and regulatory aspects. So we had both regulators on stage from Abu Dhabi and from Dubai, talking with legal experts around, clarifications around blockchain usage and data structures and so on. And we had a special event for stake pool operators, because this is essentially the people you have to trust when you do something on a blockchain. In my case, it's over 3,000 nodes who is running with specific security architecture around that, securing that the Cardano blockchain has been up for over 2,000 days, right? Which is amazing if you think about it. I'm coming from banking and high frequency trading, we were happy if we had like 95, 93% on a weekly basis, right? Because we knew we had to take down the system and deploy things. Cardano has been constantly running for over 2,000 days, right? Which is really amazing. Same as Bitcoin, by the way, right? But not many other blockchains you can speak about that. You can't speak about any other technologies outside that who's been having that kind of track record. And we also had a lot of industries there, right? So we had the World Trade Organization, we had Petrobras there, which is one of the world's largest oil companies. We had, some of the world's largest asset managers was there. We had supply chain companies there. We had some, members of parliament, both from the UK, but also from Brussels, was there in the audience. They were not even on stage. We're even at stage now where, members of parliament, they show up to our events because they want to contribute. They want to, they see that there's some things going on here, right? So it was a fantastic event, and very much looking forward to the next event as well. But there's many good blockchain events out there, right? And I also want to do a shout out to, the Bitcoin community has some great events as well.
So looking at 2024, we know that, there is the Bitcoin halving, and I'm a big fan of Bitcoin as well. So, 100%, has gone really far with this experimentation also and development within the community. But we are kind of entering now more like a positive, let's not call it bull market, let's call maybe a positive, market where you will see some more appreciation of blockchain and some more people coming into the space, more adoption. What are your expectations for Cardano? What are going to be the main area that you are working on? What's your strategy for 2024?
So for the Cardano Foundation, very high level, we're going to continue with the operational resilience, adoption, and education. And this year, of course, or next year, right? It's going to be a lot about implementing this new governance layer. As I said, I just voted literally today, a couple of hours ago, on what's called the Cardano ballot for the ratification or pre-ratification of CIF 1694, and we already seen many people voting, and it seems to be picking up. So that's great. And we would need to draft some kind of a constitution. And when I say constitution, many people think about sort of an American constitution. And that's not too far off, right? Because what you want to get to is a situation that certain governance events should be fairly easy to do, right? I want to move some code from a repository to go on chain. And this code has been verified and technically checked off and so on. So that should be it's a new feature, so it's great. But you could also think about, hey, I want to change the Cardano, primary blockchain's monetary infrastructure. That should be a lot harder, right? Or you want to change completely how Cardano is structured, so the essence of Cardano. But what is the essence of Cardano? So the way we think about it is when you think about a constitution, you actually need to go through the work of writing down a set of guardrails, which kind of reflects the core belief, the vision of what Cardano is supposed to do. And ideally, you would do that in a way which is computer readable, that it can be sort of self-fulfilled in code. I don't think that's going to happen in the first iteration, but we definitely want to get to a situation that next year we have a lot of workshops, and we're going to have a very good final draft, if not even a voting event on a constitution. Then tooling is going to be important. So what we think about is digital enablers. So we're going to push more types of identity out there. We're working very hard, for instance, on the carry standard, which is what many people know as the legal entity identifier, but also on machine readable identities and other things. So we're going to keep expanding the tooling. So we have really good Python libraries now. We open from the foundation side some Java libraries. We have TypeScript with Lucid. We have Icon, which is a smart contracting language built in Rust. We have Haskell, right? So there's a lot of people say, oh, Cardano is hard because it has to be Haskell. But we're actually in a place now where there's a lot of diversity, and we want to bring even more diversity out there, and specifically harness this EUTXO model, which is this model we've taken from Bitcoin and extended, which basically allows you to do things like side chains and interoperability and things like that way better than the account-based model. So interoperability, we're going to see some big plays coming both from the Cardano Foundation but from the community as well around interoperability next year as well.
So basically, we keep focusing on building this infrastructure, focus on the identity, focus on the governance on chain. I believe it's going to be more partnership or collaboration with large institutions, with government bodies, because those are your main. I wouldn't say client is probably the wrong way. I would say more partners, the one they understand, also the important groundwork that Cardano is doing, to build for the long term. And then I'm very interesting about interoperability, because I think one of kind of like the challenging point of the Cardano ecosystem was really that the community is great. It's a fantastic community, but it's very close. And, when it comes down to actually transaction, to, collaboration, it's kind of like challenging because it's not so open to interact with the blockchain, but with other blockchain. But the problem was really the technicality of this interoperability. So from what you are seeing, I understand there is more positive outcome coming to open Cardano to other blockchain layer. Am I correct?
I would go even further than that and say really open it up into, legacy applications around the world. So, think about, connectivities to traditional things like, Microsoft Dynamics and Salesforce and those kind of things. Because I think what you really want to get to is a situation that the blockchain is a back-end tool, and not everybody needs to understand, and deal with back-end stuff. A lot of things is just, you are dealing with, an app, or you're buying a produce, or you're getting a service, and you're having an interaction with a front-end layer. And I think, what you're going to see is some of these traditional middle layer platforms are going to anchor and figure out how to anchor and harvest some of this value on a blockchain. And then you're going to see new tools and services or just improvements in what you deal with on a daily time. So I think you have to think way beyond sort of interoperability of blockchains, and then really think about interoperability into the off-chain world. And I think that's why things get really, really interesting. So for instance, I showed you that wine bottle before, right? Here we're actually talking about, a specific high definition QR code, right? So if I sort of polish that a little bit, it doesn't work anymore, right? So interoperability to those kind of adjacent technologies, which will allow us to move beyond digital native and move into the classical world is definitely something you're going to see being pushed way more from the Cardano Foundation. You will see more use cases out there. For instance, we launched this year, I'm nearly already in January. We launched a collaboration with something called Merchandise and a company who does near field radio beacons, NFC chips. So we put 6,000 NFC chips into some fabrics for the World Lacrosse Union championships, right? And that allowed you to basically have a digital twin of your jersey or your bomber jacket, but it also allowed you to access the VIP lounge because suddenly that was your ticket, right? Plus, it also allows you to resell it and create something there, and it allows the World Lacrosse Union, if you opt into it, but it's an opt-in, it's not per default, right? That they can send you updates about the next things or what happened after the match, right? So it gives you a new way of talking to the consumer, which is not related sort of to the classical channels which you have already existing today, right? So I think what you're going to see is adjacent technologies, starting to be interoperable with the blockchain. And by that, you're going to see much wider use cases than things that starts digital and dies digital. It's going to move into your daily life, but it takes more than 12 months, but you're going to see much more of that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's probably what, for example, brands, companies are looking how we can use this new technology to interact with our customers base, our community. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because obviously when it comes down, for example, to luxury industry and luxury brand, you have got the problem of counterfeiting, the problem of preserving the integrity of the brand. And that, that's where blockchain comes in, also enhancing the experience that a user, actually somebody that is part of the community. You are not a user anymore. You are empowered to actually engage with the brand, with the product that you use much more. I've got this idea that I really think the influencer world of brands should actually come from the community, should be a decentralized movement rather than the brand picking 3 or 4 well-known celebrity to be their influencer or ambassador. They don't really maybe are so in the brand like actually the people using the product that the brand offers. Frederik, that was such a great conversation. There was so much to talk. I would have gone on and on with you, but I know that you have to rush. Thank you so much. And I would like to have you back on the show sometime soon, maybe beginning of next year, where you can tell me more about some new development in the Cardano community.
Very happy to do so. And if you are a little bit on the technical side, I really give a shout out to Lucid and Icon. Maybe you can put some links into the show notes. This is Lucid is a TypeScript way where you can build transaction easier. So if you come from another ecosystem and UTXO is a little bit hard, then Lucid is a good place to start. And Icon is a smart contracting language. And I think, there's a lot of really magical stuff happening there. So maybe you can check that out if you're on the technical side. If you're on the business side, I think you should really pay attention to all the voting, which Steffi really kindly was talking about, and this operational resilience, which Cardano is really famous for. And if you're just interested in blockchain, check out our Cardano Academy, which is launching now here, I think, in 2 weeks' time, where it really takes you from zero blockchain knowledge to quite deep blockchain knowledge in general, not just Cardano, just in general. So it's a really cool place to get really free, verified, fantastic information about blockchain in general.
Thank you so much. We will put all the links in the description to make sure, that people check out those very important information and, they get educated, because that's the main point. Frederik, thank you so much.